of my podcast. Today's episode is going to be about the correctional facilities up in New York. Robert Brooks was serving a 12-year sentence for assault, and when he arrived at Marcy Correctional Facility, he was brutally and savagely beaten to death while his arms were handcuffed behind him. The video is available online. I will not show it because it is brutal, disgusting, and hard to watch, but you can find the full body cam footage with no audio on the Office of the New York State Attorney General's website. You can find all body cam footage there. What we're going to talk about is the culture that leads to this. A lot of people have been responding to this news with shock. I am shocked to hear this shocking news. But the thing is, this news is not shocking. Actually, it's insulting to call it shocking because it shows how blind you truly are to how often this sort of thing happens. Now, news reports have been talking about how a few of the guards who participated in the beating, in the fatal beating of Robert Brooks, have had previous complaints about getting physical and attacking inmates.
Now, here's the strange part. The Department of Corrections and Community Supervision, who oversees all this, almost tried to take credit for having this evidence against these prison guards. In this statement here, they said, we're the ones who deployed the body cam program. After mounting complaints about our guards, we had to do something. But we're the ones who sent out those body cams, and the body cams are instrumental in providing evidence of what had really happened. So how about that? But what they're not considering is that they only deployed it in May, and we had this horrific event on camera in December. That's not good. How much was swept under the rug before that? In fact, no. Let's take a look at what happened before May of 2024 that could have really used those body cams. Like, for example, one of the guards who had previously been accused of being physical with another inmate that left this inmate with substantial physical and mental injuries, who was not properly held accountable at the time, who's for some reason still serving, went on to reoffend. Wow, what a concept. When these guards, when officers are not held accountable, they reoffend. It almost seems as if they should be held accountable so that these things don't happen. Body cams are great, but even better is holding your officers accountable. I mean, don't you hold the rest of us to that standard?
Another black man who went to Marcy Correctional Facility ended up brain dead with no explanation as to how it happened. And once again, families not immediately notified. They have to go through hoops to try to find out what happened. Interesting, though, that all these stories seem to be targeting one race.
And it's not just me saying that. These problems don't sprout out of nowhere. In a 2022 report, a watchdog organization, Correctional Association of New York, found many violations, from pervasive allegations of racial discrimination, mistreatment by staff, and non-adherence to the requirements of HALT, which is the Humane Alternatives to Long-Term Solitary Confinement. They're the ones who asked the Department of Corrections and Community Supervision Office of Special Investigation to investigate these serious allegations of racial discrimination and violations of human rights. This is the reason why they had to put body cams into the facility, and not because the DOCCS just decided to have a good idea and save the day. Now, hold on. This gets way worse. Let's talk about something else that happened at Marcy.
A few years back at this same prison, when 31 prison guards attacked a bunch of prisoners in a misguided revenge attack that never happened to another correctional officer. They went around beating prisoners with fire extinguishers, with fists. They were choking them, sodomizing them, tearing up their family photos in front of them, spilling food on their legal paperwork, just completely destroying it.
And they jumped on an inmate's back like it was a trampoline and kicked another inmate in the head like a football.
And threatened anybody who talked about this to the public. Where's the perp walk for these officers? Where's Eric Adams? Why isn't he getting behind them for a photo op? And why isn't this called a terrorist attack? The 8th Amendment of the Constitution guarantees no excessive fines, no excessive bails, and no cruel and unusual punishment. This is common. Go to any prison and there are complaints about prison guards being violent. And look, you might be saying, well, they're prisoners and prison's not supposed to be a fun time. True, but it is unconstitutional to carry out punishment that does not fit the crime. Again, cruel and unusual punishment. And while you may not care about that now, you will when it's someone you care or love for. Allowing yourself to become comfortable with abuse of power only enables those who abuse the power to use it against you. Today, you might be okay with it because you don't like the victim. But tomorrow, when they have power to do it to you, you won't be able to stop them. Here we are south of New York at Elmira Correctional Center in Elmira, New York. They pride themselves on their excellence Yet, if somebody contacted me and told me about their brother who many years ago died by an apparent suicide at this prison, but this was a father of four serving a short term. This man had no reason to do so, and his family said he was not like that. He was found with blood under his fingernails and bruised knuckles, and then hanging in his cell. When they found Willie Buddy Morgan hanging in his cell, it's not like they immediately contacted the family. It's not like they called and said, hey, just so you know. No, they don't tell you. They shuffle things around. You have to start asking questions, being like, hey, why can't I get a hold of him? Hey, is anybody there? Can somebody talk to me? And after a long time, they go, hey, he killed himself. And if you ask any more questions, you're getting arrested. Like, they start threatening you and shit. This isn't normal by any means whatsoever. Systemic racism absolutely exists. We all know that black people are arrested at a much higher rate. And we know that these arrests are illegitimate because the exoneration rate is extraordinarily high, meaning they didn't do the thing they were arrested for. So when a white supremacist says, how are they such a small part of the population but commit a majority of the crime, they are being disingenuous because they are not sharing the fact that they are over-policed, and a lot of these people that are arrested shouldn't have been arrested because they didn't commit the crime.
Meaning that being black in America means that you can be arrested for a crime you did not commit, then be tortured or killed at a prison by a guard who will never be held accountable. There are reports at Elmira Prison of inmates being thrown downstairs and beaten. But when I speak to the families of those inmates, they tell me that they're too afraid to come forward.
Oh, whoops. The reason the story from Marcy County Jail is so shocking is because it was filmed, not because these sort of things don't happen. These sort of things have been happening for a very, very long time. The question that you should be asking is, why won't anything get done about it?
Now back to the fatal beating of James Brooks at Marcy Correctional Facility. The correction officers were suspended without pay after the inmate beating, and one since resigned. Hey, here's a question. Why aren't they arrested like anybody else would be? What the fuck? And let's not forget the reason we are here is because there are several officers working at Marcy Correctional Facility who have had a past of physical altercations with inmates and were not properly held accountable. They were allowed to still work there. And those are just the ones we know about. This adjective, shocking, is really just a tool to downplay how not shocking it should be. It says here the Correctional Officers Union, which typically speaks on behalf of prison employees, issued a statement to describe the footage as incomprehensible, to say the least, and certainly not reflective of the great work that the vast majority of our membership conducts every day. So let's take a look at that great work at that exact same prison. Two of the New York officers, Sergeant Glenn Trombley and Officer Anthony Farina, were named in a complaint filed in a federal court in 2022 based on a 2020 incident which occurred at the same prison where Brooks died, where they failed to intervene when another officer was beating an inmate, and that beating led to permanent facial deformities. Is this supposed to be the great work that your members do daily? These savage officers should be behind bars with no bail, like they would treat any other murderer. Right now, they're currently all just fired without pay. Suspended without pay.
There are many issues that lead to these things happening, but the number one that we must remain focused on is the lack of accountability and the lack of transparency and not just with prison guards, but police in general. It is hard for a nation of people to want to be held accountable by people who will never be held accountable themselves. It is hard to accept that, and we shouldn't, to be quite honest. We should demand accountability for those who are above it. Frankly, there is no order and there is no law when there are people in society who are above it. We must all be treated equally. And when you have prison guards who are beating inmates and inmates who are afraid of saying anything because they have committed crimes and they know that the guards are going to fuck with them, you have silent torture. The U.S. has one of the highest incarceration rates in the entire world. Reform does not just happen overnight or by snapping your fingers. It takes a huge effort.
And besides getting accountability, which is still the most important, we also need public pressure and political will for prison reform.